as Dominguez have solved the problem of light square bishop, and it seems
There
like
he is.
it's okay.
He's managed to fianchetto. He's still just a little bit worse because this bishop, yeah, he's fianchettoed, but now it's biting on granite, as is the knight on f6, which is totally restricted, as Hess likes to point out, by the pawn that's two squares between the pawn and the knight. And that pawn is controlling both of the knight's advancing squares. Yeah. So maybe you go knight c5 here and offer a bunch of trades. I think that's a pretty good bet. No, of course this is equal. I mean, let's be real. Black isn't actually worse here, but if I had to choose a side, I would definitely choose white. Also, there's this pawn on b6, which is a little bit tender. So Lenier has to be, I wouldn't even say precise, but a little bit careful the next couple of moves. Maybe also b5, but that gives up the a5 square. So that's an example of something where, bishop a8, and now white starts playing a4, and black's queen side gets under fire. So you have to be disciplined, I'll put it that way.
Dominguez here thoughts a little bit more time than Wesley saw, and he's going for knight c5 trades. I bet trades are good for black, and if he gets into endgame where he has only one piece, that can be a safe path for black.
Yeah, I mean, especially if you can get a trade of rooks in, that's basically an instant draw. Just because black has no real targets and white can't progress. I mean, the b6 pawn can be defended by the other knight from d7. I wouldn't even consider this a weakness. And I don't see how Wesley decline. I mean, I guess Wesley could go knight d4 here and keep pieces on the board, but that leaves the knight on a very nice square. So this is, heading toward a draw at a furious rate, which is, of course, a great result for Lenier, who's a beast with the white pieces.
I mean, this is his strategy for today in this match, to be very solid with black and then to have white pieces and to use that. What do you think, Daniel?
Oh, absolutely. That's a strategy. And that's also always a strategy. I think even in classical chess, Lenier is super. He can play the knight off with black, but he also knows how to be solid. He has the Berlin in his repertoire. And against d4, he's just incredibly hard to beat. His Queen's Gambit declined and accepted. He plays both of those. I mean, he knows them to a T. And we'll see whether Wesley can generate any kind of life here, but I'm quite skeptical. Maybe we should switch to the other game. In the meantime, Radoslav is taking a very long think after rook a8. He still hasn't made a move, but let's see what he ends up doing.
Yeah, he feels that this is the critical moment for him. Because if black pushes c5, then, as we have mentioned, will be a really good position for black. Is there any way that this pawn pushing can be stopped? Like, for instance, knight d3 maybe?
I thought about that. I think knight d3 is a pretty serious candidate move, but I think black can still play c5, which is annoying Radoslav right now, because takes c5, and after bishop takes b2, well, white has to take this bishop, right? But whichever piece you take with, you relinquish one of the defenders of c5, and this is a draw. Takes, and I mean, lots of pieces have been traded, and neither side really can contend for anything. So I think if Radoslav doesn't find anything else, knight d3 is very possible. But I would say that rook ac1 is really the only shot at preventing c5 realistically.
He's spending so much time, Dania. He's really
this is dangerous, Ketty. This is he's entering pretty disturbing territory here. He's got 8 minutes on the clock. Ugh.
Yeah, and also sometimes you can't really make a most best choice out of the candidate moves you have. So Radoslav should make any move right now. And maybe just face the fact that he cannot really stop this pawn coming forward.
Maybe b4. This is another try, but
that's crazy.
But what's amazing? Black can still play c5. That's hilarious. Knight d7, rook d7. And okay, bishop b7, queen b7. And if bc, then you lose the d pawn. Oh, my arrow drawing today is atrocious. And if dc, then you lose the b pawn and probably also the c pawn. So Radoslav going not rook c1, but rook d1, rook f d1.
Rook f d1, yes.
And I think c5 is possible here.
The idea of rook f d1 is to there, and Wesley is playing very ambitious moves. He traded all the pieces on c5, and then he pushed knight a4, attacking rook and the b6 pawn, and now b4.
B4 trying to get b5 in, and there's knight d7. We talked about that move, king e1. The problem is if you play b5, there's the tricky move, rook c2. And you can't really take on a6. You get yourself in a lot of trouble because of the pin. So Wesley, preliminarily on pinning himself king e1, the other idea is now rook c2 is met with king d1, and the rook cannot stay on the second rank. But again, I don't think there are any threats anymore. I think Lenier can just go king e7, for instance, just make some small improvements to his position. And he's got everything pretty nicely protected. King e7, rook c7, just kind of chill and ask Wesley how he's going to make any progress here whatsoever.
The thing is that the rook on c5 is so active, and now Wesley has to fight for the file, and he plays king e1 with the idea to play king d2 and probably rook c1. And all this started by very ambitious approach of Wesley pushing b4. He could just wait a bit, but let's see what Wesley has here in this position. Any ideas that he can start kingside pawn pushes?
Yeah, maybe you can throw in like h4, but the issue is, well, where are you going from there? h4, black will play h5. So both sides can, as my old coach used to say, finish architectural design on the king side, just artistic, just make it all look nice. Hang the curtains and the paintings, but ultimately black has no weaknesses on the king side, so it's going to be very hard to manufacture anything kind of out of thin air.
Yeah, I agree with that. And the first game with black pieces, you can really ask more than this position, right? It's just fine. It's just fine.
Maybe b5, but then takes and rook c2. And again, only white is asking for trouble. I think, Katie, you were right. I think king d2 has happened, and Wesley's going to play rook c1 and basically offer a draw. So,
what do you think, Dan? Is it hard for players to switch from classical games? Like, they have played already 6 games, and their mindset is pretty much adjusted to that time control. And today they have to play so fast. Do you think they have some troubles with this, or they don't really have it? So,
by the way, I'm going to switch to the other game here. We were out of office, but see here, I think there's a 99% chance that this game ends in a draw.
Not any single weakness here for black that white can go and press. b6 can be a weakness, but now it's well guarded by the knight. Bishop c6 can kick this knight back, or b5 can also kick the knight back. You just need to activate the king and just to go and decide wherever white king goes, just to have an opposition.
Yeah, and probably in such positions, you often see the move g5 as a way of slowing down white's kingside pawns. But even this is not strictly necessary. Lenier might play it just as a way to improve. He's taking some time here, just trying to, I think, figure out the best setup for his king. You don't want to get too low on time, but we don't really have to follow this game for the next couple of moves unless something crazy happens. So let's switch back to the report game, where Richard has indeed traded queens, but that doesn't mean he's relinquishing his hopes of an advantage. A draw in Wesley Dominguez. Yeah, Wesley went knight e2. They traded knights and just kind of moved back and forth, forcing a draw.
Daniel, what a tragic start for Wojtaszek and his fans here in this first round.
D takes e5 is well, not really a problem because of d5. And look at how nice black's kingside pawn structure is. And the other thing it does is it gives the bishop an escape square on f7. And f7 in general is now a square that black can use as a transit point for his pieces. So, Wesley is basically asking Lenier how he's going to improve his position. And that's one of the problems in these positions is white has a hard time sustaining the pressure. Maybe bishop e3, and that to me seems like the most natural developing move. And then maybe it's time to strike with d5.
That's what came to my mind after f6, is he's going to attack in the center with d5.
Yeah, and the point of f6 is very clear now. The e5 pawn is now perfectly well defended, and d5 is unpleasant because you can never take on
f5.
d5. You lose the knight. So,
and on the other hand, if black wants to take d, take c4, attack the knight, and force white to take a pawn back, and then bishop takes f5 will be that threat.
yeah, so d5 threatens d takes c4, and the issue is that if white drops the knight back from g3, that's out of the question in many positions because of this bishop takes h3 tactic, which leads to immediate checkmate. Essentially, I mean, white has to give up a bunch of material to avoid getting mated. Yeah, bishop e3 has been played, and now I'm fully expecting the move d5 by Wesley.
Yeah, this game can be so complicated. Look at the center, all the 4 pawns in the center, knights both pieces, both sides, knights are here. And oh, what else you can ask here for us, for the commentators, for the viewers as well. But what do you think? Well, how white feels here in this position? Is he still okay?
Probably not great after d5. You know, I think if anybody has to be careful, well, careful is perhaps overstating. I don't think white is worse. I think white has actually several ways to keep the balance. One move that came to my mind is queen b1. And the point is that, the point is that d takes c4, bishop takes c4, and the knight on f5 is protected now by the queen. Whereas if the queen was on d1, as you indicated, you would lose the knight on f5. So that's one option. And that's a very Lenier type move. He likes these types of prophylactic moves. So, but first, Wesley has to play d5, and right now he's still thinking.
Wesley has time advantage on the clock, 14 minutes against 10 minutes, what we have right now on the clocks. So it also emphasizes that he's in his books, and that's his home preparation. Yeah,
I think bishop b3 may be the first move that put Wesley out of book.
And he's just trying to figure out why that is. And that's one of the great byproducts of being so well prepared. You just know for a fact that when your opponent makes a move that's not in your file, it must be because it's not necessarily because the move is a big mistake, but it's probably because there's something very concrete. And I think that helps Wesley find the move d5. Mm-hmm. Yeah, what do you think can he consider to take on d4 first and then hit d5?
Yeah, that's a great idea, but I think the problem here is that white's going to recapture with the knight. If you could guarantee that white recaptures with a pawn, this would be a phenomenal version of this idea. But yeah, white takes with the knight, and then d5 kind of loses its effectiveness because of how well protected the knight on f5 is. Oh my God, let's go back to the game of Richard Rapport and Wojciech. What's happening? No. You have 3 minutes. Is that what it says? Less than 3 minutes. That's what we see right now. Dang. And Wesley in a little bit of trouble here. Maybe not even a little bit. The eval bar doesn't seem to be overly concerned, but I am. Because white is threatening g3. And after the knight moves, you lose the pawn on d5. And if you lose a pawn like that, your whole position starts to crumble. So rook d8 comes to mind, but now I can start pushing the h pawn, and you can see how unpleasant this can become. Black's resources are incredibly strained here. Everything is on the verge of just falling apart in the center. This is right up Lenier's alley, this type of position. Right. What about to give up the center, like take the pawn in the center, d takes c4, bishop take e4, and rook 7 to a8. Just to, this rook on a7 looks so bad. You need to bring it. Yeah, you really do. That rook is terrible. It's not doing anything. I mean, it's just, but white is basically playing up a rook right now. Yeah, this is possible. I mean, maybe this is one of the lesser evils, but it looks pretty darn evil. Nonetheless, white looks very unpleasant. Decided g3 h4 is so strong. You just squeeze in black's position, kick the knight back, and get more space advantage on the king side. Yeah, I don't really know what to do here with black. It's just hard to propose a good move. I mean, the engine likes b5 with the idea of getting this rook into the game. That's quite a creative idea. But I don't really see what to do after. Oh, g3 h5. Oh my goodness. And all these concrete ideas, but they're so hard to spot in what is essentially now a blitz game. Yeah, it's h5 is
is the engine move, but I'm sure Wesley can spot that one. Looks very tempting.
Well, he sees H5, I'm sure, but not immediate. I mean, if you play it immediately, you just create more weaknesses for yourself. So it's important to it's important to keep H5. It's important to keep H5 for when white plays G3, because of the H3 pawn becoming a weakness, right? Rather than playing it immediately.
Yeah, and then that goes on G5 with all the threads taking on E4 too. So that's very likely what.
He's played it immediately.
Wesley's.
He has played it immediately.
He couldn't wait longer. He couldn't wait longer. Nice.
All right, let's go. But you know why I was so concerned about doing it immediately? Because now white is actually threatening the move G3. Now you might say, well, what about the H3 pawn? Well, that's exactly the thing. Let's just make a random move for black. G3, knight H3, king H2, king G2. I don't know where white should go, but this is a super unpleasant situation because now H5 is hanging. And if you go back to G5, it will a check. And well, this just looked, this looks very scary. I mean, if you ever
take
move
the knight on G6? Knight G6,
yeah, you can.
Then,
but
it's, so
Rook takes F2 in the end. Rook takes F2 in the end. But maybe for
that's why we had to play King G2.
Exactly. Maybe for that reason.
Yeah.
Oh, you're absolutely right, Katie. Queen takes G6 is winning here. Look at this line. Knight E7, then you take, and then E takes D5 with a discovery, and everything collapses. Okay, but Queen F3, no, Wesley going Queen G5. He doesn't allow G3. Now Lenier has the move H4. Takes, and now simply E takes D5, and then the E5 pawn hangs at the end of the line. And here black is just on the verge of crumbling entirely. But will Lenier see the move H4 in this position? I feel like he might play Queen G3 or King H2, which is a slightly more human move.
Yeah, it looks more human move. But you know what they are playing? They are very engine-like moves, and I'm starting to think that we have sort of like mixed moves here, because these players are pretty capable to find engine-only moves.
They're only partly human. Let's quickly check into our other game, which is going to end in a draw, I believe.
D1 to hit the center, just in any case.
Yeah, he's got massive pressure on both sides of the board. And although the knight on F4 looks nice, it's constantly falling victim to this G3 idea. So Wesley's position already very unpleasant. There was this move B5 we thought might have been the best in order to get this rook into the game as quickly as possible, but a very difficult move to see. Instead, Wesley's starting to panic. He goes Queen F6, and Lenier patiently gets his rook into the game, and now H5. Quite possibly the decisive mistake. The point is that black should wait for white to go G3 and then go H5, because at least there the H3 pawn is a little bit weak. As it stands, after H5, Queen F3, Queen G5, this is just a one-move threat. Lenier parries it with Queen G3. You can't really trade queens here, because at the end of the line, you're going to lose all of your center pawns. So Wesley dropping his queen back, King H2, another very patient improving move, Rook A8, Queen F3. And now G3 is a huge threat. So Wesley feels like he has to take immediate action, and he goes Knight H4. But this doesn't end up helping.
He goes for Knight H4, and you know what? After Knight takes the Knight, Queen takes the Knight, and there's no G3, and there's not a fork as H3 pawn hangs with a check. Instead, he went E takes D5, and the idea of E takes D5 is just to open up the bishop on the long diagonal, and sometimes just to get this queen on E4 on D3 and thread a checkmate. But let's be honest, it's not easy to make such a move. E takes D5 when there is still a pin on F5, and that's where white's strongest piece is located still.
Yeah, it really isn't easy, and it's not easy because Wesley has a tactic here that he played, which looks very, very strong. Now, his last chance to stay in the game was Knight takes D5, and after Queen D3, yeah, he's in very, very bad shape. Lenier can actually grab this pawn on E5 because Queen F4 check can be parried with Queen G3. But Wesley going for one final attempt. Knight takes G2 looks like a very powerful move because you can't take the knight, you get pinned. But Lenier had seen this, and he goes Queen D3, cold-blooded, threatening checkmate. Wesley intercepts this with E4, rook takes c4, queen takes f2. Now the move of the game. A lot of people would panic here, but not Lenier. He just goes king h1, just gets out of the pin, and the game is immediately over because he's threatening rook back to e2. There's going to be a mate threat on h7, and there's nothing the black can do about it. Absolutely nothing. Rook f3 allows rook e8 check. g6 allows rook e2, and rook takes g2. Wesley ends up going knight h4, but of course, Lenier picks it up. g6, and now the final flourish. Rook takes h5, check. This leads to mate on the next move. G takes h5, queen h7, and if the king moves aside, then the queen captures on g6 with mate. What a phenomenal, phenomenal game, Keddy, to win this match.
This is the clearest winner I have ever seen in the rapid game by Dominguez. He just made it perfect to start the game and end in this with a very clear calculation.
Indeed, and that was your FIDE Grand Prix Rapid Tiebreak Daily Recap.